Elena Thompson stepped off the Greyhound bus with a single duffel bag and the kind of scars that made people stare, then pretend they hadn't. She came to Millridge, Georgia, a sleepy southern town with wide porches, war memorials, and more American flags than streetlights, because it was the kind of place where people minded their own business. Or so she thought. At 38, Elena had learned the art of disappearing. No social media, no old friends, no questions. But you can't hide scars like hers. The one that ran from her jawline to her collarbone told a story most people couldn't stomach. And the tattoo inked beneath her sleeve? That one could get her killed. She was supposed to be a ghost. But this town didn't let ghosts rest. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun beat down on Main Street, already warm for spring, when Elena first walked into Old Glory Diner. The smell of bacon and burned coffee wrapped around her like a memory she couldn't place. The red vinyl booths, the jukebox playing George Strait, the Veterans Eat Free on Sundays sign above the register. It was almost too perfect. Raymond Baxter, the owner and a former Marine with a limp and a sharp eye, looked her over without flinching. Her posture, her eyes, the way she scanned the exits, he knew a soldier when he saw one. But he didn't ask questions, he just said, "You start at 6. Don't be late." By lunchtime, Elena had already served half the town. Teachers, mechanics, retirees, and most importantly, the Veterans Corner. That was their territory. Every morning, like clockwork, 4 old soldiers parked themselves in the back booth and swapped stories over watery coffee. They didn't take kindly to outsiders. Kyle Anderson, the youngest at barely 31, had served one tour and never let anyone forget it. He clocked Elena the second she stepped behind the counter. Tall, scarred, silent. He smirked. Looks like the kitchen fire fought back. The others chuckled. Except for Dean Wallace, a broad-shouldered Vietnam vet with a storm behind his eyes. He didn't laugh. He watched. Elena ignored the comments, kept her movements efficient, her voice neutral. She'd been through worse. Desert ambushes, betrayal from within her own command, and more nights in combat zones than she cared to count. A few aging bullies in camo hats didn't scare her. But Kyle wasn't just a punk with a loud mouth. He had connections. And one of those connections had a grudge that reached back over a decade. That afternoon, while wiping down a booth, Elena reached across the table. Her sleeve rode up just an inch, revealing the edge of a tattoo. A falcon wrapped in a lightning bolt. A ghost. Dean froze. His coffee cup stopped midair. He knew that mark. Ghost Company. A name whispered in military corners, denied by official records, and tied to a mission in 2009 that had gone sideways fast. Officially, Ghost Company had died in Iraq. Unofficially, one member had survived and vanished. Dean didn't say anything that day, but the wheels were already turning. Elena had hoped this town would be a resting place, somewhere to be forgotten. But secrets don't sleep, and the past has long legs. Joanne Miller, a waitress with a big mouth and a bigger grudge, found paperwork in Elena's locker. Then the black sedan started showing up near her apartment. Government plates, men in suits who didn't blink enough. And then came Colonel James Barrett, the man who sent Ghost Company to die. He walked into the diner like he owned it, a smile tight, eyes cold. "Sergeant Thompson," he said loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Or do you go by something else these days?" That was the moment everything shifted. The town turned into a battlefield. The waitress became a fugitive. The diner, a front line. And Elena, she wasn't running anymore. She had buried enough. If Barrett came looking for ghosts, he was about to learn. some ghosts fight back. There's a rhythm to small-town diners, a quiet choreography of refills, muttered greetings, and the hum of jukebox country ballads in the background. For the first few days at Old Glory Diner, Elena Thompson tried to melt into that rhythm. She moved like a shadow, efficient and wordless, her eyes down, her sleeves long, and her presence barely more than a whisper. But in Millridge, Georgia, silence doesn't keep you safe. It only draws curiosity. The veteran's booth was the heart of the scrutiny. Kyle Anderson, youngest in the group, was there every morning by 7:01 a.m., boots on the seat edge, his Oakleys perched on his buzzed head, and a smirk on his lips. To him, Elena was a riddle he didn't like not having an answer to. She was tall, her posture too upright for a waitress, her movements too calculated. And her silence, it grated on him. "Morning, Scarface," Kyle called out on Elena's third day, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "You spill soup on yourself or walk through a fire?" Elena didn't flinch. She brought the coffee pot to their table and poured without a word. Dean Wallace, seated next to Kyle, gave a soft grunt and narrowed his eyes. "Back off, Kyle," he muttered, low but firm. "She's just doing her job." But Kyle was enjoying the attention. "Come on, Dean, don't tell me you're not curious. Burns like that don't come from slipping off a ladder. Looks like someone tried to teach her a lesson. Or maybe she taught someone else one." That line stuck with Dean longer than he cared to admit. He'd seen those kinds of scars before, on Marines who'd crawled out of firebombed villages and on medics who'd stayed behind during ambushes. The scars on Elena's arms weren't random. They had the precision of war. The other regulars took notice too. Not all of them were cruel. Some were just cautious. A woman who walks like a soldier but won't say where she served doesn't sit right with folks in Millridge, and it wasn't just the veterans watching her. Joanne Miller, another waitress who'd been working there since the Bush administration, clocked Elena's every move like she was tracking an incoming storm. Joanne was the type of woman who believed in order, appearances, and keeping her friends close and enemies even closer. Her lips were always pursed, her eyeliner always sharp, and her suspicions never stayed private for long. On Elena's second morning, she brushed past her at the coffee station and said, voice dipped in sugar and spite, "That's quite the souvenir you're hiding under that sleeve. Kitchen accident?" Elena said nothing. Joanne leaned in. "You know, customers like smiles. Think you can manage that with that face." That night, Elena stayed late, wiping down booths long after Joanne had gone home early, claiming a headache. The jukebox played low, Johnny Cash, something about walking the line, and Elena, for a brief moment, let her guard slip. She sang under her breath. The words weren't random, it was cadence, military cadence. Dean Wallace had been halfway out the door when he heard it. He stopped cold and turned back. That voice, the tempo, the tone. He hadn't heard it since his days in the sandbox. "Elena," he said the next morning when she refilled his cup. "Where'd you serve?" She didn't look at him. "I didn't. That's not what I asked." She turned away before he could say more. Dean knew better than to push, but he didn't need to. He was already pulling at threads in his mind. The way she surveyed the room, her reflexes, the strange tattoo he'd caught a glimpse of. Black ink, geometric, wrapped around a falcon. Not standard issue. Not anything he recognized from official units. But something about it itched in his memory like a sand-flecked bandage. By the end of the first week, the whispers were constant. Regulars speculated. Joanne dropped hints. Kyle stirred the pot. "Scars like that mean baggage," Kyle said one morning as Elena passed their table. "Bet she's got a record. Or worse, a discharge. Wonder what kind of trouble follows her around. This time, Elena stopped. Slowly, she turned back toward the booth. For the first time, she smiled. But it was the kind of smile that made you rethink your words. She reached forward with her right arm to refill Kyle's cup. Her sleeve rode up again, just enough. Dean choked mid-sip. The tattoo. He saw it clearly now. A stylized falcon. A lightning bolt, letters below, GC703. Dean's stomach dropped. It couldn't be. Ghost Company wasn't real, not officially, not anymore. And every man he knew connected to that mission was dead. Or so the Army claimed. He sat in his chair long after Elena walked away, staring into his cup like it might give him answers. That night, Joanne came back to the diner after hours, pretending she'd left her purse. In truth, she'd watched Elena leave from across the street. She slipped into the locker room and found Elena's locker slightly ajar. Inside, among worn clothes and a pair of polished boots, she found it. A worn army patch, half-scorched, and a folded document. She recognized the formatting immediately. Military discharge. She didn't get to read the name before she heard footsteps and stuffed it into her apron. The next day, the energy shifted. Joanne told 3 regulars and Kyle by noon. "Stolen valor," Kyle said, voice dripping with fake patriotism. "She's pretending to be military. Got the tattoo and everything, makes me sick." That afternoon, he waited until Elena brought his burger before launching the attack. "You know what stolen valor is, sweetheart," he said loudly. "When someone pretends to be military, fakes the ink, the walk, the look, just to get sympathy or free coffee." Dean slammed his fork down. "Enough, Kyle." "What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. She's a fraud." "No, she's not." Dean's voice was cold now, controlled. "You don't know what you're talking about." Raymond, who had been watching from the counter, stepped out from behind the register. "Elena," he said quietly later, while she arranged slices of pie. "If there's something I should know—" "There isn't," she replied, shutting down the conversation. But the damage was done. The town had tasted blood. And in small towns, gossip doesn't fade, it sharpens. That evening, a heavy-set, red-faced man stumbled into the diner at 3:15 p.m., already smelling of whiskey and sweat. He sat at the counter, leering. "Hey, Scarface," he barked. "You gonna serve me or stand there looking pitiful?" Elena approached calmly. "What can I get you?" "What happened to your face? Boyfriend get too rough, or are you into that kind of thing?" Laughter rippled from a nearby booth. Before Elena could answer, a chair scraped. Dean stood. He walked slowly to the drunk, placed a hand on the counter beside him, leaned in. "You ever mock a Purple Heart vet again in front of me," he said, voice like gravel, "and you'll be eating through a straw." The room went quiet. The drunk muttered something, threw cash on the counter, and left. Dean didn't look at Elena, but the message was clear. He'd seen enough. He believed her. That night, alone in her rented room above the hardware store, Elena opened her notebook. Day 217. They haven't found me, but they're close. She rolled up her sleeve fully, examining the tattoo. Ghost Company, 7th Squad, 3rd Platoon. A unit erased from history, and a past that refused to stay buried. On the surface, Millridge was the kind of place where not much happened, and folks liked it that way. The coffee was always lukewarm, the gossip hot, and everyone's business eventually ended up on the prayer list at First Baptist by Sunday. But underneath the surface, things had started to shift. Something about Elena Thompson had struck a nerve, and it wasn't just her scars, her silence, her soldier's posture, her phantom-like presence. It all stirred memories that veterans like Dean Wallace and Raymond Baxter thought they'd locked away years ago. And then there was that tattoo. Dean couldn't shake the image. The falcon, the lightning bolt, GC 703. That night, long after the diner lights dimmed and the last coffee cup was stacked upside down, Dean sat at his kitchen table with a battered shoebox and a bottle of bourbon. His hands shook slightly, not from the drink, but from memory. Inside the box were the ghosts of another life. Photos curled at the edges, medals tarnished with time, and a single snapshot taken in the middle of a sandstorm in Iraq. 8 men, caked in dust and exhaustion, arms slung around each other, grins half-formed. In the center, a young woman with short-cropped hair, eyes sharp with purpose, the same eyes he saw every morning at Old Glory. Dean didn't sleep that night. Back at the diner, the situation was turning. Whispers had evolved into sharp-edged rumors. Joanne's discovery in the locker room, Elena's half-burned unit patch and discharge papers, became fuel for speculation. Joanne hadn't read the name on the papers, but she knew a military document when she saw one. And to her, secrets meant danger. By the time Kyle Anderson got wind of it, it was too late to keep it quiet. He marched into the diner the next afternoon, chest puffed up like a rooster. "She's lying," he declared loudly to a group of regulars. "People like her fake their pasts all the time. Throw on a tattoo, walk like a soldier, and act like they've seen combat. It's stolen valor, plain and simple." Joanne nodded somberly. "I found military documents in her locker, but there's no record of an Elena Thompson in any VA database. My cousin works the regional center. Said it flat out, no file, no service." Tommy, the young cook with inked sleeves and a heart too big for his age, overheard it all. He didn't say much, but his fists clenched as he buttered toast. That night, Elena sat in her tiny rented room above Mitchell's Hardware, reviewing her exit options. She never unpacked more than she had to. Her duffel bag was still half full, clothes rolled tight, ready to disappear again at a moment's notice. But now, the black sedan had returned, twice. Parked across the street with tinted windows and government plates. Different driver each time, same stillness. Whoever they weren't local, and they weren't subtle. Elena didn't sleep. She never really did. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the creaky twin bed, thumbing through her old leather notebook, its corners bent and stained by dust and sweat. On one page was a date, March 17th, 2009, the last day of Ghost Company. Beneath that, a photograph, creased and singed, showed the same soldiers Dean had stared at hours earlier. One face was violently scratched out. On the back, "We die so others live." The next morning, Raymond Baxter arrived early to the diner and found Elena already at work, wiping down counters, counting bills with her usual steady hands. He'd been watching her closely the last week. Too closely, maybe. "Elena," he said finally, "I don't mean to pry, but I've seen that tattoo before. Not exactly like it, but close." She didn't look up. "It's nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing. Looks like a unit that got buried deep, the kind they don't talk about on Veterans Day." Elena paused, then quietly, "I came here to forget, Ray. Not to explain." Raymond nodded. "Fair enough. But this town doesn't let folks stay invisible for long. Sooner or later, someone's going to find out what you're running from." And someone already had. Later that day, Joanne's son, Brian Miller, showed up at her front door unannounced. His Army days were behind him, 2 years and 1 dishonorable discharge ago. Brian had his mother's sharp eyes and his father's temper. He smelled like whiskey and gasoline. "Got any coffee?" he asked, barging in without waiting. Joanne blinked. I thought you were in Atlanta. Was. Heard there's someone interesting working down at the diner. Scarred-up woman. Military type. Joanne stiffened. How would you know that? Brian pulled out his phone. Small world, Mom. Someone posted a photo. I recognized her. She's the one who got me booted, Black Sergeant. Claimed I harassed a local in Afghanistan, made up the whole thing. Joanne remembered the day the military police knocked on her door, the humiliation, the quiet shame. She'd believed Brian's side of it, needed to. Now she wasn't so sure. What are you planning? She asked, voice tight. Brian smiled, teeth yellowed. Let's just say, we have unfinished business. The next morning, Kyle showed up at the diner with a new fire in his step. Elena sensed it immediately. He was itching for something. Morning, soldier, he said mockingly. Heard you've got fans online. Pictures and everything. You must be proud. She ignored him. You lied to everyone here. Wore that fake tattoo like it meant something. People like you make a mockery of real service. Dean, seated across the booth, slammed his fork down. That's enough. Oh, you believe her now? Kyle scoffed. You saw the ink, Dean. You think it's real? Dean didn't answer. But Elena did. She reached into her apron and calmly pulled out a folded document, placing it on the table between them. It was her original discharge form, burned at the corners, half redacted. Dean picked it up, scanning what little wasn't blacked out. Then came the bombshell, a photo. 8 soldiers, dusty, bruised, arm in arm. In the middle, younger, unscarred, but unmistakably Elena Thompson. Dean stared at it for a long moment. Ghost Company, he whispered. Kyle leaned forward. What the hell is that? You wouldn't know, Dean said flatly, because you never saw real war. That night, Colonel James Barrett walked into the diner. Sharp suit, military bearing, and eyes that missed nothing. The past had arrived, wearing polished shoes and a government smile. Sergeant Thompson, he said. Or is it Carter now? You've used so many names over the years, it's hard to keep track. Raymond stepped from the kitchen. We're closed. Barrett ignored him. We need to talk. Privately. About what? Elena asked, calm as ever. About what you still have, and what I'm here to retrieve. Raymond stepped forward. She's not going anywhere. Barrett gave him a withering glance. This is military business, civilian. Stay out of it. My diner, my rules, Raymond replied, his voice like stone. Barrett placed a card on the table. You have 24 hours, or we come back, with more than words. He turned and left, the bell above the door chiming behind him. Later that evening, alone again in her room, Elena did what she hadn't done in 13 years. She opened the false bottom of her duffel and pulled out a small steel case. Inside, a Beretta M9, a spare passport, and one final object, a tiny encrypted flash drive. On the back of it, a faint engraving, RH-17. Reva Hale, her commanding officer, presumed dead. The drive had been passed to Elena moments before everything exploded in 2009. She had never looked at the contents. Now, as she stared at it in the dim light, one thing became clear. Barrett wasn't after her. He was after this. And suddenly, it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about everything they buried with Ghost Company, and what still might rise from the shadows. There's a saying in small towns. You can outrun your past, but not your neighbors. And by sunrise the next morning, Elena Thompson's name, or rather, the versions of it that were whispered and mangled, was on the lips of half the folks in Millridge. Joanne Miller, tight-lipped and righteous, had already made her morning rounds. She'd shown Elena's scorched discharge paper to 3 regulars at the diner, along with her own dramatic interpretation. She's not who she says she is. That paper? I found it myself, and there's no Elena Thompson in the VA's system going back 15 years. To some, it was just gossip. To others, especially those who spent their youth in uniform, it was a call to arms. "Stolen valor?" Kyle Anderson said with glee, standing tall near the register as the morning crowd filtered in. "I did a tour in Kandahar, and I've got the papers to prove it." She's got stories and scars, but no record. You do the math." Dean Wallace sat silently in his usual booth, jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might snap. He'd seen the photograph, he'd held the documents, and most of all, he'd seen that tattoo. The one that still haunted the edges of his memory from a time no one dared speak of in public. But before Dean could speak up, the tension snapped. It was just past noon when the door to the Old Glory Diner opened and in walked Brian Miller. Joanne's son hadn't changed much since his discharge. He wore civilian clothes, but carried himself like a man still fighting a war. Only this time, the war was personal. He slid into the corner booth with Kyle like he owned the place. "Long time," he said to his old drinking buddy. "Didn't think you were coming back," Kyle replied. "Didn't think I'd need to," Brian said, eyes sliding toward the counter where Elena moved quietly behind the register. But sometimes the past needs finishing. Brian wasn't just another bitter veteran with a grudge. He was the catalyst, the man whose lies had helped bury Ghost Company, and whose accusations had nearly ended Elena's life 13 years ago. Back then, Brian had dragged an Afghan girl into a storage tent during a humanitarian mission. Elena, then a rising sergeant in Ghost Company, had intervened, filed the report, stood her ground. The Army had tried to keep it quiet, but Reva Hale had backed her. The tribunal had been swift, and Brian had been discharged, dishonorable but not imprisoned. He hadn't forgiven Elena. Now, in Millridge, he saw his chance to settle the score. That afternoon, Colonel James Barrett returned. Not in a suit this time, but in full command mode. He entered the diner with 2 men in plainclothes behind him, both with the unmistakable bearing of former special forces. Their eyes scanned the room like radar. "Elena Thompson," Barrett announced, loud enough for every customer to hear. "You're coming with us." Raymond Baxter stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, his face set in stone. "Unless you've got a federal warrant," he said, "you're not taking anyone out of my diner." Barrett reached into his coat and produced a document. "Military intelligence authorization. She's in possession of classified material. She's a fugitive. This gives me full jurisdiction." Dean stood up from his booth. "She's not a fugitive. She's a veteran, a soldier you threw under the bus." Barrett ignored him. "This is a matter of national security. I suggest you don't interfere, Sergeant Wallace." "Retired," Dean snapped. "But I still know a cover-up when I see one." The air grew thick. Elena stepped out from behind the counter slowly, her expression unreadable. "If you think I still have it," she said calmly, "you're already too late." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "Then you won't mind coming with us to confirm that." At that moment, Joanne Miller emerged from the back hallway holding something in her hands. Elena's discharge paper, the original one she'd taken from the locker weeks ago. She handed it to Barrett like it was a gift. "I found this," she said quietly. "She's trouble. I don't want her here." Elena didn't even look at her. She didn't need to. The betrayal stung less than expected. Joanne's loyalty was always to her son, no matter the cost. Barrett pocketed the document and gestured to his men. "That's enough," Dean growled, stepping forward. Barrett turned. "You're interfering with an active investigation." Dean didn't budge. "What exactly are you investigating, Colonel? The woman who saved lives when you wanted silence, or the piece of truth that got away from you?" The door to the diner burst open. Kyle and two of his friends, young, angry, and badly misinformed, rushed in like they were storming Normandy. "There she is," Kyle pointed. "The fraud." Barrett's men moved toward Elena. Dean lunged. The diner exploded into chaos. Chairs crashed. Coffee mugs shattered. Kyle tried to grab Elena's wrist, but she moved like lightning. Her training kicked in. One twist, one pivot, and Kyle found himself face first on the tile, arm wrenched behind his back. Barrett reached for something under his coat, but Raymond Baxter was already there, a service pistol in hand, steady as ever. "Not in my place," he said. "Back door's open, Elena. My truck's got gas. Keys are on the hook." She didn't hesitate. Years of combat conditioning took over. Assess, decide, act. She snatched the keys, ducked through the kitchen, past a stunned Tommy, and into the alley out back. Behind her, she heard Dean shouting, "If you want to detain someone, start with me." Elena ran. The streets of Millridge blurred as she drove. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. Not yet, not until she had leverage. 20 minutes out of town, she turned onto a dirt logging road that wound deep into the pine-covered hills. Raymond's old ranger cabin, long abandoned, stood hidden among the trees. She parked the truck behind a shed, swept the cabin for surveillance, then locked the doors. Then she opened the steel case. Inside, the Beretta, 3 mags, a burner phone, and the encrypted flash drive. The drive Reva Hale had given her 13 years ago. The one Elena had never dared to open. Until now. She pulled out her old laptop, still caked with sand dust from another world, and booted it up. Password, RH17. It worked. A folder opened. Inside, photos, names, wire transfers, shipping manifests, memos with Barrett's signature, weapons, contracts, deals brokered behind the backs of Congress, units used to protect dirty money, and Ghost Company. They had been the fall guys. A note from Reva read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Finish what we started. And don't let them turn us into ghosts." Back in Millridge, the fallout began. Dean Wallace was detained, handcuffed, hauled into a black SUV. Raymond was questioned, but not arrested. Tommy stood in the doorway of the diner, fists clenched. Joanne watched it all unfold from behind the register, her lips trembling. Kyle limped away, his pride more wounded than his body. And across town, Barrett made calls, panicked ones. Elena was gone, and the one thing that could destroy him was finally in the wind. The wind whispered through the pine trees like a warning, soft but urgent. Atop the ridge overlooking the sleepy town of Millridge, the forest grew thick and quiet, far from the sidewalks and suspicion. In the heart of it stood an old ranger cabin, half forgotten, weathered by storms and silence. It was there that Elena Thompson had taken refuge, Raymond's keys still in her pocket, the engine of his rust-colored pickup cooling beneath the trees. She'd barricaded the doors, checked the windows, secured every angle like she'd been trained. Inside, the only light came from a camping lantern perched on a crate. Her sidearm rested within reach. The encrypted flash drive, now unlocked, glowed faintly in the port of her sand-worn laptop. The files were damning. Not just about Barrett, but about the entire rotten system that had turned Ghost Company into a disposable tool for back-channel deals. There were documents, communications, and worst of all, photos. Elena saw herself in one, younger, standing over a makeshift map with Reva Hale beside her. Behind them, stacked crates stamped U.S. property. Non-transferable were being loaded into a truck bearing private contractor logos. They had been lied to, used, then erased. And yet she was still here. Barely. Elena stepped out onto the cabin porch just after midnight, the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. The cold night air cut through her, but it wasn't the wind that made her shiver. It was the knowledge that Barrett wouldn't stop. She looked out over the tree line, scanning for movement. The silence was total. Until it wasn't. A twig snapped in the distance. She crouched low, drawing her sidearm instinctively. Another sound. A whisper of fabric against bark. Someone was moving, carefully. Then came a voice, low but firm, laced with disbelief. "Ghost, too? Is that really you?" Elena's breath caught in her throat. That voice. She stepped forward cautiously, heart hammering in her ears. And out from the shadows walked Major Reva Hale, leaning on a cane, her face leaner, weathered, but unmistakably alive. "They buried us in silence," Reva said, her voice ragged with time and effort. "But we weren't done talking." Inside the cabin, the air turned electric. Elena boiled water while Reva collapsed into a chair by the old stone hearth. They stared at each other, not as ghosts, but as survivors. 13 years, Elena whispered. "I looked for you." Reva gave a dry laugh. "And I hid, not from you, from them. After the tribunal, they offered me a choice, disappear or die in an accident. I took the smarter option. I thought I was the only one left." Reva's expression hardened. "You were, for a long time." Elena pulled out the flash drive and slid it across the table. "I opened it," Reva nodded. "Then you know." "I know enough," Elena said. "Weapons deals, contractors. Barrett's name on the orders. Ghost company sent to clean up something they didn't want found." Reva leaned forward, the fire reflecting in her eyes. "It gets worse. That wasn't just about covering illegal shipments. The man we were sent to extract in 2009, he wasn't a prisoner. He was the middleman, an asset, and Barrett didn't want him captured. He wanted him gone." Elena leaned back slowly. "He sent us into an ambush." Reva nodded. "So there'd be no witnesses." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of betrayal, names of fallen soldiers hanging unspoken between them. Elena eventually spoke. "He's after me now. He came to the diner. Dean's been taken. Raymond's probably next." Reva exhaled. "Then it's time we finish this." "What do you mean?" "I've been collecting evidence," Reva said, tapping her bag. "Tracking his moves, his promotions, his off-the-books missions. Everything connects. All we need is a way to get it out." Elena nodded. "I know someone. High clearance. Owes me a favor. He'll take it straight to the Pentagon if we can stay alive long enough." Reva smiled, pain creasing her face. Always the optimist goes too. Before dawn, they set up basic defenses around the cabin. Tripwires, mirrored signals, fallback routes. It was makeshift, but they had done more with less before. Elena had just laid the final warning flare when she heard something behind her. Kyle Anderson. Out of breath, dirty, and holding up his hands like a guilty child. I didn't know where else to go," he said. "I've been looking for you since the diner. I heard what happened to Dean. They're locking people up." Elena didn't lower her weapon. "You brought them, didn't you?" "No, I swear. I left my phone back in town." Reva stepped into view, her pistol raised. "Strip," she ordered. Kyle blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard her," Elena said. "Check for trackers." Minutes later, convinced he wasn't wired, they let him sit near the fire, wrapped in a thermal blanket. "I was wrong about you," Kyle said, not meeting Elena's eyes. "I let my pride get weaponized. Barrett used me. I won't let that happen again." "You can't undo what you did," Reva said, her voice hard. "But you can help us buy time." Kyle nodded. "Whatever you need." At dawn, the first alarm tripped. Movement on the ridge. 6 men, tactical gear, suppressed weapons. "Barrett found us," Reva said, loading her sidearm. "We split," Elena replied, "just like we planned." She handed Kyle a pack with flares, smoke bombs, and a compass. "Lead them east. Make it loud. Make them chase you." Kyle hesitated, then took the pack. "You got it." Elena turned to Reva. "Safe house is 5 clicks west. I'll circle back. We meet at the stream crossing." Reva nodded. "If you're late, I'm not waiting." "I wouldn't expect you to." The trap unfolded perfectly. At first, smoke plumes confused their thermal optics. Tripwires triggered rock slides. Kyle's decoy drew half the team down a ravine. Elena and Reva slipped through the tree line like phantoms, decades of training carrying them forward. But plans never survive first contact. Gunfire erupted, sharp, close. "Elena!" Reva gasped, stumbling behind her. She'd been hit, blood soaked through her jacket at the waist. Elena dragged her behind a fallen tree. "Through and through. You'll make it." "Not fast enough." Reva reached into her coat and handed Elena a small metal case. "The full archive. It's all here. Testimonies, flight logs, shell companies. Take it. Finish this." Elena took the case. Her voice broke. "I'm not leaving you." Reva gritted her teeth. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Elena met her eyes. "I stopped taking orders the day Ghost Company died." She helped Reva to her feet, arm around her shoulder. They moved slowly, painfully, but with purpose. Behind them, the forest burned with suppressed fire and Barrett's fury. By nightfall, they reached the edge of town. Elena left Reva hidden in a thicket near the creek, promising to return. Then she slipped into Millridge, sticking to back alleys and service doors. She needed allies, she needed a plan, and she needed Dean Wallace. Inside the county detention annex, Dean sat bruised but unbroken. When the sheriff tried to get answers, Dean gave only one reply: "Get me a lawyer and a recorder. I have testimony that'll shake the ground under Fort Bragg." He didn't know Elena was alive, or that Reva Hale had returned from the dead. He didn't know that the truth was now burning in the hearts of 3 survivors who had lost everything and still chose to fight. But when Elena arrived at the back gate of the station, covered in soot and blood, a deputy let her in without a word. "You're supposed to be dead," he said. "I get that a lot," she replied. They walked past silent halls, past holding cells, to a back room where Dean sat slumped in a metal chair. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Elena." "We've got work to do," she said, dropping the metal case on the table with a metallic thud. Dean straightened. "You found Reva." "She found me." The ghosts had returned, and the reckoning was just beginning. Sunrise over Millridge had never felt heavier. The golden light spilling over the rooftops seemed almost too bright for a town harboring such darkness. The trees, the church steeples, the American flags fluttering from porches, all looked the same, but the ground underneath had shifted. Elena Thompson, blood crusted on her jacket, dirt smudged across her cheek, stood in the back room of the Millridge Sheriff's Station, facing the man who had once called her a fraud. Now, Dean Wallace looked at her with a kind of awe, like a man who had just seen a ghost walk through fire. And maybe he had. The metal evidence case she slammed on the table between them wasn't just full of files. It was full of history, buried, redacted, sealed under order history. Inside, communications logs, black budget transfers, eyewitness statements, and operational footage from body cams that should have been destroyed. All pointing to one conclusion. Colonel James Barrett was not a war hero. He was an architect of betrayal, and Ghost Company had been sacrificed to protect his lies. I need this sent to every federal oversight office that still has a working fax machine, Elena said, her voice low but commanding. The Inspector General, Senate Armed Services. Every friendly contact you still got, Dean. Dean nodded slowly. We'll make it loud. But it won't be fast, she warned. Barrett's already mobilized private security, not just old soldiers, contractors, the kind who don't wear uniforms and don't ask questions. Dean leaned back, sighing. So, we make noise fast enough they can't bury it again. They got to work. Within the hour, the sheriff's office fax line was humming like a diesel engine. Reports were sent, calls were made, burner phones lit up with encrypted signals. Across state lines, a retired JAG attorney named Monica Eldridge, now a podcaster with a loyal veteran audience, picked up a cold call from Dean Wallace. Within minutes, she had the story in motion. Within 90 minutes, she was driving to Millridge with a body camera, 3 spare batteries, and a legal pad full of hard questions. By noon, she was seated across from Elena, recording. State your name for the record. Elena Thompson. Former rank and unit? Staff Sergeant, Ghost Company, 7th Platoon, U.S. Army. Officially dissolved in March 2009 after an unauthorized mission in southern Iraq. Were you the only survivor? Elena hesitated. For years I thought so, but Major Reva Hale, commanding officer of Ghost Company, is alive. She's in hiding, wounded. But she has corroborating testimony and original logs. Monica leaned in. And you're willing to go public? Elena looked directly into the lens. If I don't, the next Ghost Company won't survive at all. By 3 p.m., Monica Eldridge's live stream had over 65,000 viewers. By 3:30, that number passed 100,000. Barrett's name was trending. But with exposure came escalation. Outside the sheriff's office, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up. No sirens, no plates, just tinted windows and cold intent. The sheriff, a former Marine named Harold McCrae, stepped outside with his arms folded. You boys got business here? The man who stepped out wasn't Barrett, but his ID said Federal Liaison, an empty title often used to sidestep jurisdiction. We're here to take custody of a fugitive named Elena Thompson, and any property she's transferred to your office. Harold didn't blink. Not without a federal warrant signed by a sitting judge, and if you try to push your way in, I've got 6 deputies and a live stream already rolling. The liaison smiled like a man used to getting his way. He didn't this time. Inside, Elena's nerves were steel, but her hands shook when she looked at the photo Monica laid beside the recorder. Ghost Company, 2009. Iraq. Dust storm in full swing. 8 soldiers, arm in arm, her in the middle. Reva next to her, and behind them, Barrett, smiling like he didn't have blood on his hands. Monica tapped the photo. What's the one thing people don't know about Ghost Company? Elena stared at it for a long time. That we volunteered. Monica blinked. For what? For a mission we thought would save civilians, Elena said quietly. We didn't know we were clearing the scene for a weapons handoff. We didn't know we were expendable. Her voice hardened. Barrett knew he needed a unit off books, disposable, and when things went wrong, he left us there to die. An hour later, as rain began to fall outside, Sheriff McCrae received a second visit. This time, Barrett himself stepped into the station. Gone was the sharp dress uniform from earlier. Now he wore tactical gray. His face was calm, but his eyes were boiling. "Sheriff," he said politely, "we can do this the easy way." "You've had enough easy ways," McCrae replied. Barrett turned to the viewing window behind which Elena sat, still giving testimony. "She's compromised. That information is protected under federal classification. I'm here under directive to seize all material and detain her." Monica stepped forward. "You'll need to go through the Whistleblower Protection Act. She's already filed through my legal channel. Any attempt to remove her will be considered obstruction." Barrett smiled coolly. "You think Washington will protect her?" Monica stared back. "I think the Internet will." At that very moment, Dean Wallace sat in the next room, answering a flood of interview calls. CNN, MSNB, Fox, even international outlets. His Silver Star and service record made him an unassailable voice. "She's telling the truth," he repeated, "and I stand by her." Within the hour, a call came through. Congresswoman Teresa Langston, chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee, was on the line. "I want a secure transfer of the files. We've opened a federal investigation. Barrett's not to leave the state." The sheriff relayed the order. Barrett, now visibly sweating, clenched his jaw. "Don't make a mistake here," he hissed. McCrae folded his arms. "You already did." As dusk fell, Elena stepped outside with a blanket over her shoulders. Her body ached, her mind was reeling, but she was upright and alive. On the steps of the sheriff's station, a small crowd had gathered: veterans, townsfolk, reporters. Then Kyle Anderson stepped forward. He'd cleaned up, fresh shirt, shaved, eyes clear. In his hand was a folded American flag. "I got this at my dad's funeral," he said. "Marine, Gulf War. I didn't know what respect meant until I watched what you did this week." He held it out to her. "I don't deserve to hand this to you, but you damn well earned it more than I ever will." Elena took it, tears stinging her eyes. She said nothing. She just nodded. Back inside, Monica wrapped up her files. "I've booked you a safe house in Nashville. Transport's arranged. And Reva." "She's already there," Elena replied. "We got her out last night." Monica smiled. "She's asking for you." Elena chuckled softly. "She never asks for anyone." "Then you must be special." At 9:47 p.m., a final message came through. The Pentagon had opened a formal inquiry. Barrett was ordered to remain in custody under federal supervision. His security clearance was revoked pending investigation. He didn't speak as he was escorted out of Millridge under guard, but Elena watched from the second-story window of the sheriff's office. The past wasn't just on trial. It had been sentenced. 6 months later, the town of Millridge looked the same, but it would never truly be the same again. The porch lights still flickered at dusk. The church bells still rang on Sundays, but people walked with their heads a little higher, their eyes a little more aware of the quiet battles fought around them. And in the center of that change stood Elena Thompson, not as a fugitive, not as a ghost, but as a guardian of truth. The investigation into Colonel James Barrett had shaken the foundations of military oversight. Following the release of over 400 classified documents, thanks to Elena, Major Reva Hale, and the legal team led by Monica Eldridge, a wave of reform swept through Congress. Barrett was dishonorably discharged and sentenced to federal prison for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and the unlawful endangerment of active duty personnel. But for Elena, justice was never just about punishment. It was about purpose. Shortly after the hearings, Elena declined every television offer, every book deal, every lucrative podcast invitation. Instead, she did something quieter, but infinitely more lasting. She founded the Ghost Light Foundation. Its mission was simple: to shine light into the darkest corners of military service, where cover-ups thrived, whistleblowers vanished, and good soldiers were left behind. It began with a single phone line, a 24-hour veteran support and reporting hotline. Then came the scholarship program for the children of fallen whistleblowers. Then the Legal Defense Fund. Within 5 months, Ghostlight had helped expose 2 more buried cases and cleared the name of a dishonorably discharged medic in Nebraska. Elena ran it all from a modest office above a hardware store, just like the one she once hid in. She didn't wear her scars like armor anymore. She wore them like history, not erased, but carried. One evening, as summer faded into early fall, Dean Wallace sat with Elena on a wooden bench overlooking the Millridge ridgeline. They sipped sweet tea, the kind only Harold McCrae knew how to make right, and watched the sun dip behind the trees. "You ever think about how close we came to losing all of it?" Dean asked. "All the time," Elena replied. "But we didn't." "You're not just surviving anymore," he said quietly. "You're building." She smiled. "That's the difference between a ghost and a guardian." Down in the valley, a children's baseball game echoed across the fields. A new plaque had just been placed at the local VFW Hall, in honor of Ghost Company, for the truth they carried and the silence they broke. Kyle Anderson helped build the frame. Tommy, the young cook, had painted the lettering. Joanne Miller, now quieter but changed, donated her late husband's flag to fly above it. Even Reva Hale, once thought dead, came out of a hiding to speak at the dedication. Her cane struck the podium like a drumbeat of survival. "These aren't just names," she said, voice trembling. "They're stories we weren't supposed to tell, and now they'll never be forgotten." As applause filled the air, Elena didn't stand on the stage. She stood in the crowd, among the people, where she had always belonged. Because in the end, Elena's battle wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about restoring dignity to those who were denied it. It was about teaching a town and a nation that the scars we carry can be the very things that light the way forward. It was about proving that when truth refuses to die, even the dead can rise again as guardians. And when history tries to forget you, you write your name in fire. What would you do if your truth was buried and no one believed you? Elena Thompson stood up and changed everything. If her courage moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-world stories of resilience, justice, and transformation. Your voice matters. Join our growing community that believes truth deserves a spotlight. Let's keep these stories alive, because sometimes one voice can echo louder than an entire system. Turn on notifications so you never miss the moment truth rises again.